I have 8 minutes to tell you everything that you need to know about the Beatles. So, what are we waiting for? The Beatles were formed in the early 60s in Liverpool. John Lennon met Paul McCartney at the Woolton Fete. Everything changed from that day. They soon began writing songs together and were joined by Paul's friend George. The band was originally called the Quarrymen, but they changed it to the Beatles. People came and went from the band, and soon they were all shipped over to Hamburg to play in the clubs over there, playing for sometimes 12 hours a day. They came back to England and kept trying to grow as a band. When the Beatles finally started getting massive, it stopped clicking between them and drummer Pete Best. He was sacked and replaced by another Liverpool drummer, Ringo Starr. Upon seeing them playing live at the local Cavern Club, local record store owner Brian Epstein made it his mission to make them all stars. He began a quest to get them signed. Decca Records said no. Nobody wanted them, until EMI took a chance on them. Their sets were mainly covers, but they were working on 1 or 2 originals. They released Love Me Do and Please Please Me, which were huge songs, and they followed this with their debut album Please Please Me. Beatlemania began to grow in Britain because people were blown away by their personalities and the quality of the songs that they were releasing. They followed it up quickly with another album, With the Beatles, which cemented them as a serious band who weren't going anywhere. It's at this time bands like The Who, The Kinks and the Rolling Stones were all starting to show up. Brian didn't want them to go to America until they had a #1 hit, so when I Wanna Hold Your Hand went to #1, off they went.
There are rumors around that this is Britain's revenge for the Boston Tea Party. 3,000 screaming teenagers are at New York's Kennedy Airport to greet, you guessed it, the Beatles. This rock and roll group has taken over as the kingpins of musical appreciation among the younger element. Some music critics call their harmony unmistakably diatonic.
The reaction upon their arrival and at their shows showed that this was a once-in-a-lifetime cultural event. They made 2 appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show and it was watched by over 73 million people. The Beatles had broken America. The Beatles then decided to make a movie because, well, why not? Everyone was making movies. Elvis made movies. A Hard Day's Night had some of their most well-crafted songs to date and the film was a smash hit at the box office. The Beatles were now some of the most famous people on the planet. They were mobbed wherever they went. Paparazzi followed them relentlessly. As fun as this can sound, soon the 4 of them became tired of it. They had also met Bob Dylan by this point. Dylan was the figurehead of the folk rock sound that was becoming huge in America. With the influence of Dylan on the band, and in particular John Lennon, they began writing more mature songs like Help and You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. Smoking weed was also a big part of all this. The culmination of this sound would be in their next record, Rubber Soul. In my opinion, this is the start of the generational run that the Beatles would put out. Oh, and John told everyone that they were bigger than Jesus, and nobody in America liked that one. None of this experimentation would have been possible without George Martin in Abbey Road Studios, who always pushed boundaries to make sure that their visions were always realised. Without him, their next record, Revolver, wouldn't have stood a chance. This is often cited as one of the greatest albums of all time. It was also their first LSD-inspired record, with trippy sounds and crazy guitar noises. At the heart though, it contains the infamous Beatle melodies. Also, yeah, trust me, Tomorrow Never Knows is a banger. Go check that one out. Oh, and around this time, John met Yoko. The Beatles had to stop touring. Their sound couldn't be heard over the screaming fans, and their songs were now too weird to play with 2 guitars, a bass and drums. Not touring meant that they could make whatever they wanted now. They played their final concert at Candlestick Park and went on a much needed break. Well, what did they do on their break? They went off to India. They wanted to explore what meditation could do for them all as a band. And unless you're George Harrison, it really isn't a lot. The band didn't take to it and they left. Then their manager Brian Epstein died of a drug overdose or a suicide. It's not really clear. What was clear was the seismic hole that he had left. The band now needed a leader. Anyway, not long after, Paul had a dream about a concept album about a band. So yeah, a band within a band. It was going to be called Sgt. Pepper's. The album is a range of all their influences of the past few years, but without managing to sound like anything else of its day. The album opens with the classic song for which the album is named, and then closes with the most mature and interesting Beatles song to date, A Day in a Life. In this song, you can hear the contrasting songwriting styles of John and Paul mixed perfectly. Around this time, they also performed a song that was seen by over 1 billion people around the world, All You Need Is Love. This was for the first ever global satellite broadcast. It's also around this time that the relationships within the Beatles really started to turn sour. They were all getting sick of each other and were not happy being Paul's puppets. Because Sgt. Pepper's had been his idea, he really rolled with that empty leader thing. As Paul was vying for control of the band, John entered into a relationship with Yoko. And, well, yeah, his wife wasn't too happy about that. Also, George is starting to want to write more and more songs. For their next album, the White Album, George wrote his best song to date, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. They were all arguing a lot in the studio, and one day, Ringo stormed out of the sessions. He quit the band, but he changed his mind when he got some flowers on his drum kit. Isn't that sweet? Paul's next big idea was to get the band back together for another album and a film. And while they all got along better than we always thought they did, things still weren't great. But Paul wrote Get Back, so who cares? And John wanted to release new, horrible music with Yoko, so really none of them wanted to be there. George stormed out this time, but eventually he returned. They formed the company Apple Corps to control all their affairs and release the music, but it was a real pain in the arse for them, to be honest. Although they did play a great concert on the roof of the office building. So every cloud, right? Naturally, when they all can't stand each other, the best thing to do is get into a small space and write some music. So for their next album, George brings Here Comes the Sun, John brings Come Together, and Paul brings his medley. Ringo even brings in Octopus's Garden, the best song on the record. They write a masterpiece of a record, maybe their best, but it's not enough. They all want to make their own music. They're all ready to be more than just Beatles. George wants his songs to be taken seriously. John wants to create art with his new wife. Paul doesn't want to fight for control in the studio anymore. Ringo, I suppose he's happy doing whatever actually. John spiritually leaves the band first, but it's Paul who makes it official. He quits the band on April the 10th, 1970. And the Beatles are no more. Did I be 8 minutes? Thanks for watching, all you rock and rollers. I hope you enjoyed this quick dive into Beatles history. So my job when I started this channel was to get people back into rock and roll. And so I thought, how better to educate people than by 8-minute deep dives into a band and their legacy? Well, what did you think? If you like this video, click like and subscribe. If you want to know more, I've got a ton of videos, especially about the Beatles, so go and click on one of those and I'll see you all down the road.